Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, a live discussion on House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 5, We Light the Way. So, as always, joined here by a special guest to talk about this, what I think is a really good episode. But first, Alyssa, thanks so much for joining, Alyssa. Always good to have you.
Good to be back once again talking about House of the Dragon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Darrin. See each other a lot lately, but that's all good. I'm all good with that.
Oh no. Keep it going. Nobody I like more than you folks to sit and chat with. So I'm enjoying every minute of it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this discussion this evening.
All right, so yeah, let's jump into overall thoughts of the episode. I am still processing this one, honestly. I think this might be my favorite episode so far. I don't know, but it is definitely it's got all the intrigue, political stuff, a lot of shocking things. It's really pushing the story forward. So yeah, I was really excited about this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it felt like a mid-season finale in ways because it is the closing chapter for these particular actresses who are playing Rhaenyra and Alicent. As we get the new actresses coming in next week. We've seen them on the previously or the preview for next week. And I think it played that way to me, like kind of a mid-season finale. Like it really I think moved the story forward, but also just felt bigger than the other episodes. Maybe because there was a wedding, and you know what happens with Game of Thrones weddings. Although I'll say that the bride and groom both survived this wedding, so that's pretty good for a Game of Thrones wedding. Joffrey's though 0 for 2. Joffrey's don't do well in Game of Thrones weddings, but yeah, I really like this episode, and then to me this was the homecoming for Alicent, just in time for the actress to change. Finally this actress gets to really have a big episode. I think that we just saw a big leap in character for her, which was it's gonna carry forward into the rest of the season. So yeah, I really enjoyed this episode as well.
This is gonna be really fun for me because Mark and I have been kind of bouncing back and forth on liking and disliking episodes, almost from a polar opposite standpoint constantly. And I'm very pleased that tonight's episode gets to continue that, because this one is actually, I think, the episode that kind of upset me the most, or I guess in a way, mostly disappointed me. To me, the motivations felt very soap opera-y. This felt much more of a CW type of drama and reaction to everything than I would have hoped. Nobody seems to be, or almost nobody seems to be actually acting or choosing their path with any aegis outside of Daemon. Everybody else seems to just be reacting and in a way kind of whining. And it kind of came up, I think, to the fruition of the big climax of the episode in the wedding here, almost kind of hit the point to it. So this was one of those where I was like, I'm not feeling it for anyone. To me, everybody's motivation is kind of lacking and whining and blaming everyone else. And I don't feel the intrigue of different motivations coming into play. I just sort of see a need for drama, and all these scenes are just emphasizing that. So, some episodes work, some episodes don't. For me, just, yeah. The drives for everything just kind of fell flat, or disappointing, at least.
This is so interesting, Darrin. Usually we agree on most things, and that's so boring. And now we get to go back and forth from
I know, dynamic conversation. I'm excited. And
I will
Alyssa's been like back and forth as us too. Sometimes my
Yes.
side, sometimes
Yeah, no,
yours
the last
side.
one when we did the She-Hulk, I was on Team Darrin. I'm on Team Mark for this one. So
Exactly. So no, I'm enjoying it. It makes for a real interesting conversation. Because again, not that the show isn't great, the actors aren't doing an amazing job. You're right, Alyssa. It's the last that we'll see of the young versions of these characters. And to me, there's kind of a loss with that too, of like, and I'm gonna feel like all of these stories didn't mean anything when he jumped to the first. How is that gonna carry forward? Especially, I think there was an opportunity we'll get to that would have really, I know historically couldn't have happened, but would have been really interesting. We'll get to when we get to the wedding. But yeah.
So yeah, you liken it to like a CW show. I would actually compare it more to something like The Crown or Downton Abbey or something like that, which are shows I also don't like, but 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 it's I would say it was a more of a like an adult sort of royalty themed scandal rather than like teenage drama. But I don't know. This is personally what I got from it. But yeah, all right, let's go ahead and jump into the episode. Let's start with this opening scene. We finally see Lady Rhea riding in the Vale, and maybe it's because I'm familiar with the source material. I kind of knew that she wouldn't last very long, and surprise, she's actually not that bad looking. So Damon's just he's just being a bit of a sourpuss about the sheep being prettier. And I actually love how she throws that back in his face. It's like, oh, have you come to finally consummate our marriage? Well, I'm not interested, but perhaps the sheep will. I hear they're prettier than us. But I don't know what everyone's interpretation of this, because I've heard some people say that perhaps he didn't intend to kill her and was just winging out, but the opportunity presented itself. She certainly got the impression, like she kind of, as she was talking to her, got the light bulb. Oh shit, you're here to kill me. So I personally think that that's the case. The way he was immediately going like this to the horse, I feel like he was like setting it up to collapse and at her sudden movement. So it kind of felt to me like he'd planned it. And the other thing I wanted to sort of talk about is I watched, and this is something I'll talk about a couple times throughout this episode, because I watched a video that said that this is a change from the book, which I don't think it is, because the book was said that she died on a horse, and that is the official accounting and is an official history book. And in fact, I've read other, I think there's some, I can't remember where I read it, but they said somewhere that a lot of people thought that Damon killed her or caused the accident, and the accident was a smokescreen. So it was just because the books is just a lot of different perspectives and nobody knows the right thing. So for me, this was right in line. In fact, I was expecting this scene. I was expecting Damon to kill her. But anyway, yeah, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I looked up the exact quote in the book. This is how it's described in the book. In 115 AC, there came a tragic mishap of the sort that shapes the destiny of kingdoms. The bronze bitch of Rhinestone, Lady Rhea Royce, fell from her horse whilst hawking and cracked her skull upon a stone. And that's all it says, that she cracked her skull. She fell from her horse and cracked her skull. If you watch the post show thing, what's his name? Ryan Condal, one of the showrunners. He said, "Yeah, I read that line, and when I read the book, and I was like, oh yeah, Damon totally killed her." So we're gonna put that in the show, and I read it the same way, honestly, because you have to remember that this is written as a history book from the point of view of a maester who's recounting history and can only write what is recorded in history. But I think George R.R. Martin a lot of times wants us to be thinking about things like that. And I think if you read between the lines, that I mean, when I read that in the book, I was like, there is no way Damon didn't kill her. I mean, she just happened to fall off her horse. Yeah, right. He's been talking the whole time about how she's the prom bitch and he doesn't want to be married to her. Yeah, right. Now, as far as what you were talking about before, Mark, of what his motivation was, that comes. The director of the episode said that in the post show, where she was like, "Oh well, the good thing is we don't really know why Damon was there." Well, maybe you didn't know when you directed the episode, but I think it was pretty obvious. He's not just wandering around the Vale wearing a creepy cloak just going on an afternoon stroll. Like, it's just standing there creepily wearing this cloak, and he's not. Of course, he was there to kill her. No, there was no doubt in my mind. I think that was. I mean, directors are welcome to interpret the material however they want, but I think she's just flat out wrong there. I think he was very, very obviously premeditated and there to kill her. I mean, why else would he be there? So, and as you pointed out, she picked up on that as well. So yeah, I think that it was planned, and I like this reinterpretation this interpretation of the book. I don't think it's accurate to say it goes against the book. I think it's an interpretation of that history.
No, I said I was watching the after show bit too, where he did quote the bit, and yeah, you can interpret that. And I mean, honestly, how I felt in the show, you could even leave that up to interpretation. Was he there to kill her? Did he take advantage of a situation? Was it just one of those things? I think you can, with a certain reasonableness, kind of go in any direction on that. To me, it looked almost like she started it and he just kind of took advantage with her sort of freak out. Because how can you plan a horse to rear up, fall back, and crush the rider behind it just in that manner? You know, and like you said, Alyssa, the what is he, a ghost waiting out there in the winds in some ways? Yeah. That's sort of how they're setting up Damon in all of this, is he's just kind of like the creepy boogeyman in the background that's going and fucking with things. It's, how did you know she was going to be out there on that particular time? Why are you by yourself? How did, you can ask a lot of these questions. And I think, to me, that's one of those, if the director doesn't explicitly tell that story and leave that up to interpretation, that's bad storytelling. He got sent home. He was, to me, it was like he's on his way back home and he just ran into his wife. He's by himself. He has no horse. He has nothing with him. All of those start falling apart, I think, the minute you start kind of diving in a little bit deeper into the questions. But yeah, did he intentionally hide out there to cause her horse to rear? I don't think so. To me, I read it more along the lines of, hey, just you and me out here. You're a little nervous. Maybe I can take care. And in fact, I think he was even willing to walk away before she had to talk more shit to him. And then he was like, all right, better finish this off now.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, that is true. He does seem to, I don't know.
So, I mean, yeah, I think you could read that anyway.
The one thing I would say is, like, the moment he sees her, he starts doing this weird thing with the horse, being like, whoa. It seems like he's setting the horse up to freak out.
Sure. And I would totally buy that. But again, how is he out here in the middle of nowhere in the one random place at the one particular time where she is going? That's just where it starts to get almost like, supernatural boogeyman.
Well, maybe she rides that route a lot. And
Sure. Totally. They don't give the impression that he's around a whole lot to know a lot of her things. But again, I think this becomes interpretation. It's almost a knick-knack thing.
He clearly knew she was going to be there. He wasn't just happened by happenstance just wandering out there wearing a creepy cloak. He clearly knew she was going to be there. He was clearly there to murder her, whether it was by making the horse rear or whatever other way he was planning to murder her. That's what he was there for. I mean, I don't know. To me, it's pretty straightforward, but I don't know why else. Why was he there if not to kill her?
I don't disagree with that really at all. I just have to agree with the statement of kind of like the causation of the incidents being a little funkified.
I mean, it could be he was there to sort of confront her, and he wasn't sure exactly what he was going to do.
Why did he not just go confront her in her castle or wherever she lives? Like, why does he have to wait till she's absolutely in the middle of nowhere where there's nobody else around? I mean, of course he was there to kill her. I mean, there's 0% chance he wasn't there to kill her.
He's the boogeyman murder ghost of Westerosi. That's who Damon is.
Right. So, all right, let's talk about this royal trip to the Driftmark, where it seems like the Valerians knew that the king was coming, but they didn't know what he was going to propose. At least that's what I got out of it, because when he showed up, they weren't there to greet him in the courtyard like we see every other time a king goes somewhere. Everyone in the freaking castle comes out and greets them, but this time it was just the kids there, and what's his face? Harlan is his kid, right? It's something strong. The hand of the king, the new hand of the king. Something
Lionel Strong.
Lionel, that's it.
Yeah.
Lionel Strong was all pissy. He was like, "Whoa, this is a reception we get, blah blah blah." And then Viserys like, "I don't give a shit. Let's just get over with." and so then then he makes the proposal to Corlys, and then I think Corlys was still pissy with him for the whole thing, and that's why they didn't receive him. So that gives me the impression he did not expect this proposal. And when Viserys gave the proposal, then he felt better of it. He's like, "Oh, okay, well, this is more like it." But he was still like trying to do the negotiation. Can he have my last name and and that kind of thing. But then when Corlys and Rhaenys is alone, she's kind of not on board with this, because she's kind of thinking, well, you're setting our son up to be involved in a war, basically. And Corlys is still kind of got the blinders on. It's like, nah, it'll be all good. Everything's all good. And then we get the scenes with the. Well, let's talk about this first before we move on to the next scene. But yeah, Darrin, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, Corlys definitely in this, you can see, is the political maneuverer. That is his outlook. How can he get his family, his name, his son into position? I actually did appreciate the last name conversation there, because that's a legitimate conversation. They're bucking a lot of Westerosi trends, and they need to figure it out. And the fact that it's like, well, okay, I'll agree to it. I just want to know how we're going to figure this. I get that his drive and motivation is much more political, and Rhaenys is a little more observant of the realities. And I like the fact where she was like, "Hey, I divorced myself for this situation a long time ago. It's probably better off that I don't have to be the one trudging this." But you're right. Concern for the family totally makes sense. What surprised me in this is kind of like what surprised the hand is, man, Driftmark is an empty castle. There is like nobody in that. It's desolate. That place looks nasty. Coming all the way up to the top, and yeah, there's no greeting. There's no nothing. I'm like, is this a surprise visit? Did they send a raven? This is, it was kind of a shock in that sense. And even going to the castle, and there's Corlys, sitting on his throne, waiting for the king to come in. Finally, he does come up and bow. But I was just, I don't know. I guess they've been involved in the war in the Stepstones. Is there's been a lot of placements there, so it could be understandable why a lot of guards and personnel aren't there. It really surprised me. I'm like, man, if they're trying to set up the impression that this place is in the middle of frickin' nowhere, they have done a good job, because there seems like there's like nobody here. There's the creepy kid playing ball in the background, and like that's it. So I could understand Lionel's kind of reaction off of that, because that did surprise me. Like, really? This is the king, and your response and reaction to him is, man, I'll send a butler, I guess, to get you. And it also shows how weak Viserys is, because he's like, yeah, whatever. I don't even care anymore. I just need to settle this thing with my daughter. So they don't really deal with that idea, but it does kind of put Viserys in a really weakened position walking into all this, if you're looking through those political eyes.
And I think that was the point. I saw it as as a total power play. He may not have known precisely why Viserys was going there, but he knew he needed something from him. Why else would he be going out of his way to Driftmark when after I don't know how many times they've spoken to each other since he left and went off to Damon, but probably not very often since he's left the small council. They probably haven't had very many, if any, interactions. And so for Viserys to all of a sudden, oh, let me come visit you in Driftmark, and like, yeah, what do you want from me? Like he senses that he's the one in the power position here, and he was totally playing it up. In fact, I think he had a line to Rhaenys, something along the lines of, "Did I go a little too far with that?" I can't remember exactly what his line was. It was something. It was something like, did I push it? Did I take it a little too far, or something? But I think that all of that was very much intentional. And when Viserys makes the proposal, I think Corlys is trying to mask the giddiness in his face. Like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Well, let me make. I think he was just saying he didn't really care about any of that, the names or anything. He was just like, he just had to like, well, let me think about this, and just play with him, and rather than going, yes, definitely, which is I think the look on his face to me told me that that's what he wanted to do, but he was like, well, let's talk about some things, let's negotiate some things first. And I think he's just, again, it's a power play. That's how I interpreted all of that.
Yeah, no, definitely. He was doing the haggling thing. Never let them know that you're interested.
Right.
Oh, maybe I might be interested. What about what if we keep the last name? All right, and so then we get a scene with Rhaenyra and Lenore. Lenore, walking along the beach. And I thought this was really interesting because they get the two betrothed from their perspective. They're kind of, these decisions are being made for them. They don't really have a decision in the matter. And in the after show thing, they talked about how they're sort of thinking of as kind of more modern, whereas their parents are sort of more classic or traditional. Where they're like, this is our royal duty. We understand. We accept this. We're going to get married because we're going to bring our houses together. It's going to be better for the realm. It's going to lead for more power for both of us. But we're not actually in love with each other. We're going to go do separate things. And I like how they come to that agreement. They use the what was it? Goose, and what was the other thing?
Duck.
The goose and duck used a different kind of foods to sort of allude to this. And of course, as we learned very shortly after that, Lenore is in fact gay, and that she's Rhaenyra seems to be aware of this and doesn't really care. It's like, you can do your thing as long as I can do my thing. And he's like, yeah, that works for me. And so I found that very, very interesting. Very interesting agreement. And it makes me think that these characters are actually kind of smarter than the parents, that they're able to just look at it this way. But also, I see Damon's influence on Rhaenyra, of course, like what he was saying to her about the difference between duty and actually going out and lusting. And so I think that Damon's sort of influence definitely influenced her in that regard as well. So Alyssa, we'll start with you this time for this one.
Yeah, I was wondering how that scene played to people who didn't already know Laenor was gay, because he is in the book, and so I knew he was gay, but I found it interesting that they've never hinted at him being gay before this, as far as I've seen, because he was just in the Stepstones War, and then I think he was in one quick scene as a younger kid at the tourney. That has never even been remotely hinted at. But the whole I prefer goose and prefer duck thing was very Seinfeld-esque kind of metaphor for being gay. And that was the whole thing. And I'm like, I wonder what people who don't know yet that he's gay, are they picking up on that's what the metaphor is for? So that was an interesting choice. to not reveal what they were talking about. And then Rhaenys and Corlys also mentioned it in their conversation where Corlys was like, oh, well, it's something he'll just grow out of. And she's like, no, I don't think so. But that all of that was before the show actually showed you that he has a gay lover. And I knew he was gay just from the book. So I'm just like, I wonder how that's playing to people who don't know this yet. So it was an interesting choice to do it in that order. But as far as their little deal that she had, and I absolutely agree with you that that's 100% from Daemon. That's a Daemon influence decision, but it's a smart one. I mean, and I think Laenor was like, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm totally on board with this. That I think that it was a good agreement.
From somebody that didn't know going into this and hadn't read any of the books.
Okay.
It to me, it did play out very much during the scene of like, oh, okay, because it's like, are you implying that you're just interested in different types of people, or you're different? Okay, So to me, it did figure out. And again, this is another one out of those where this is one of my favorite scenes in the show, just because I do like the kind of more modern-esque, and this is Rhaenyra kind of like taking charge, learning that lesson of kind of like, hey, all right, this is the thing. Plus, I've got my guy on the side. That I think is that really worked well. To me, the one question coming into this was, okay, wait a minute. So how does she know this? Is this a known thing? Do we have this? And we have the little conversation afterwards between mom and dad saying about the predilections and, oh, he's young, he'll outgrow it, or, those types of things. So there may be rumors or stuff around that could have picked up, but that was the kind of one thing that confused me more. Not so much of the, oh, they're coming to an arrangement. This is smart of her. I like that. That was very obvious. It was like, wait a minute, how does she knows this? We get no intro into that, or we got no predisposition. I think outside of, I think the first scene where they come up and he's practicing with his lover at that, we find out later on that there might have been kind of a hint of that. But that was the only thing kind of was like, this is great. But where did this come from?
Well, I think this Targaryens are a large family, but they're like a small town. Everybody knows everything about everybody.
Yeah.
Like I would say there would be no way that everybody doesn't.
They kind of grew up together a bit.
Yeah,
each other.
Sure.
It seems like everybody would just be so obvious. Like, yeah, that dude's gay. Of course he is. Like everybody would just know. It'd be hard to keep that a secret within that family. At least that's how I read it.
Sure. Right. Exactly. I'm just saying is for me to think about that while I'm catching up with what's going on to the scene is kind of a lot of work on my part. But like I said, I really enjoyed it. It was like, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to go on the knowledge that they know all this stuff, without kind of being introduced to that first. And then, could there have been an eye wink? Could there have been a notification? Could it have been like, some comment to the guy before they went on their walk? And maybe there was, and that was just edited for time. I mean, to be perfectly honest, there may have been shot that was scripted and shot that just didn't come into the final product. And as I said, it's not a huge criticism, but it is a question that arose in the middle of that. Not, are they talking about being gay and straight and can they do their own thing? It was like, but how do they know?
Yeah. Like I was familiar with I haven't read Fire and Blood, but I've read other things. So I was familiar with the story, so I knew that he was gay. And when I first saw that scene, I was thinking people who do know that probably could understand it better. I was thinking that perhaps they should have revealed it before that scene, and that would have, because I felt like I had an advantage of grasping that scene more.
That's exactly what I was saying. I wondered how that played to people who didn't know that he was gay. How do you interpret that whole duck and goose conversation? Because to me, it was very clear what she meant, but only because I knew. But if you don't know, and it seems to me like they should have revealed he was gay before, everybody starts making innuendos. Like maybe even just like a little hint at it in a previous episode, just have him give a little wink to a guy or something, just something. Whereas the show had given us absolutely nothing about his sexuality until this episode. So I mean, at least like give some sort of hint before that conversation for the people who don't go walk into this already knowing because they read the source material.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's the only it. I could just say again, as somebody not knowing anything, it wasn't the realization that he was gay and had a lover, and that was what they were discussing. That to me was very obvious. It was more along the lines of, like you said, well, when did this information come up, and how do people know it? You're assuming that that everybody knows everything, and I'm going to go with that. From a show creation standpoint, that's just where it seemed to have come from. And the fact that you guys are asking how it plays off, I think kind of implies that you would have felt surprised if you didn't already know.
Yeah.
So I was surprised because I didn't already know.
But it is, yeah, no, fair enough. But it is interesting, like especially like Alyssa, you mentioned the line from Corliss. It's like, oh, something he'll grow out of. Like it does sort of speak to the this medieval time period and how they not really, of course, accepting of homosexuality and stuff like that, and it's seen as deviant. So it's something that he has to hide, which is we got a bit of that with Brindley and Loras and the Game of Thrones show proper.
Sure.
And so it does add that interesting sort of layer to it and the Rhaenyra is giving him like the perfect cover to hide, to like go live his life as he wants but have the public face, so that's what makes their arrangement like even more wise.
Yeah. Oh, and that duck and the goose conversation also was kind of a modified version of something. I think it was like the Grand Maester who says it in the book, where they're questioning, where there's a conversation about, yeah, but he's gay, and he's like, well, I don't always like to eat chicken, but or fish, I forget which.
It was fish.
It was fish. Like I don't always like to eat fish. But when I'm served fish, I eat fish. So they kind of. So I feel like they sort of, with the food metaphor, sort of modified it for this goose and duck.
Yeah, that's right.
They had
that was in the World of Ice and Fire. I just read that. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of what's in the World of Ice and Fire is the same as what's in Fire and Blood.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's Fire and Blood just expands on it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right. So let's go back to King's Landing and talk about Alicent. And I think Alyssa kind of alluded to this in her opening thoughts about, I think this was a great character shift for Alicent. And I just love her character story this episode. And I like how it starts with the scene with her father sort of leaving, and she's still kind of being naive, especially from her father's perspective, is like, oh, well, it's kind of your fault because you chose Rhaenyra over me. And she's like, no, but she swore to me and she believed, and I believed her. And he was trying to like give these wisdom to her, saying like, look, she's never going to rule. You have to prepare Aegon to rule, and basically warning that if she succeeds, then there's going to be war. And then, of course, well, yeah, I want to bleed this into the Laris scene as well, because I think that bleeds into the where he, is sort of hinting at basically telling her about the tea and all this shit. And so her whole world comes crashing down. So it starts with her, with her father saying, oh, I believed her, and then realize all that faith and stock that she put in her was for nothing. And that it completely destroyed her. Her whole world was in turmoil, and she felt betrayed. And I think that was a really sort of inciting incident for her. I want to talk a bit more about Laris himself a bit later. I got more to say about him, but focusing more on Alicent, we'll start with you, Darrin, this time.
Look, I do like that kind of first scene between the father and the daughter, really kind of trying to throw out the reality of the world that she is in. Um, Part of it, of course, falls a little flat because it's like, yeah, you won the one that you put her in with your own maneuvering, and now now you've been caught with your machinations, and now you're like, hey, look out, little girl, things are gonna be bad. So I'm not entirely sympathetic with where he's coming from. I do appreciate just the father to daughter. Look, the reality is there's going to be war. People aren't going to follow this, and I certainly appreciate that. Where that he's coming from. Um, the I don't know. We'll kind of get into, I think, a little bit more about this. The whole machinations of like, okay, new creepy guy with just information to drop and create some drama. What the hell? Where are you from? What's your just? Oh, by the way, did you know that there was a tea that was dropped off? It's just kind of like, we're poking and we're messing with things, and while her taking a stand for her own position is grand and glorious, it's also hard to have sympathy when she's feeling betrayed about, look, I don't think Rhaenyra really lied to her. She just didn't tell her the whole truth. She didn't sleep with Daemon. She went and slept with somebody else, but she didn't sleep with Daemon. And to somebody who also is sleeping with her dad and had a whole relationship behind her back that she didn't tell her about, to talk about being betrayed for information, also again rings a little hollow to me. But that's sort of my Alicent quick summary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody is completely in the right in this situation, and I don't really probably any situation in this show, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think anyone really has the moral high ground over the other. You can look at both sides and go, but you did that, yeah. And now get back to to what Otto Hightower says. Well, first of all, I do agree with Darrin that I don't like, you're the cause of all of this, dude. It's like, it's I said that, I think I said that last week too, because he's trying to take the moral high ground, like he's not the one who put all of this in motion to begin with. If he hadn't told Alicent to go and read stories to Viserys, none of this would even be happening right now. So it's I don't like him like acting like he's totally innocent either. But one thing it's interesting that he told her is that well, Rhaenyra is going to have no choice, but she's going to have to execute your kids because they are going to be, the realm's not going to accept that she gets to be queen when there's a firstborn son. So she's going to have to execute your kids. And I couldn't tell how Alicent reacted at first. I feel like she wouldn't have wanted to totally believe it at that point. And what gets her to believe that is when she finds out that Rhaenyra kind of betrayed her. Because she was also asking Rhaenyra about, not this is in her goddamn business, honestly, but she was asking her about losing her maidenhead, because if you lose your maidenhead, like, then you're impure, you can't have kids and whatever, like the rules are, like like you have to lose your maidenhead to your husband, your royal husband or whatever. You can't do it beforehand, and that aspect of it is correct. That she did, just not to the person that Alicent thought. Not that that's any of her fucking business anyways, but just explaining, I guess, why she felt betrayed, because she was lied to, or deceived, not directly lied to, but definitely deceived about her innocence. And I think that then leads her to finding it easier to believe that, Rhaenyra could do that in that situation. She could murder my children in order to protect herself. So I think that's how she was able to believe that. But yeah, I definitely agree. There's lots of shades of gray in here that I don't think Alicent is in a position to take the moral high ground. Neither is Rhaenyra, to be honest.
Well, lying about sex does definitely mean you will murder someone. So, I mean, I can believe in that kind of jump there. No, I
Well,
mean, I get what I totally get what you're saying, and that I'm
Yeah.
being
just
facetious.
to do whatever it takes to look out for number one.
Right.
And
Yes.
if she's being threatened by Allison's children, and that's what she needs to do.
Hmm.
So I think that's where the connection comes more than not just, oh, you're lying about sex, therefore you can commit murder.
Right.
It's
Well,
more of the she's gonna do whatever she needs to do to look out for number one, no matter who she has to hurt.
Well, and I think that may be the shot of like, well, I guess I have to do the same. That for Allison's motivation, I got to look after my family and my kids.
Hmm.
I mean, in that sense, I do totally get that. But like I said, it's kind of like little pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I don't agree with Otto or Allison as well either. I think they're both being hypocrites, particularly Otto. Is like, oh, like the way he's like, oh, blaming Allison. It's not her fault, dude. It's your fault for setting up this whole damn thing in the first place, and it's your power grab that got you fired.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
the Viserys completely saw correctly of his power grab. So yeah, no, I don't agree, but I think it's very interesting character stories, particularly where Alicent is concerned, because yeah, I think even though it's none of her fucking business whether she keeps her maidenhead or not, but in the world she lives in, and from her perspective, she had like a good friend and a bond, and now she realizes that that's not what she thought it was, that she could make a solemn promise and swear on the memory of her mother and flat out lie to her. And she did lie, because I can't remember, we talked about this last week, because she said specifically something like, she said Damon didn't touch me, and he kind of did.
Sure. Well, I said,
and that her maidenhead was intact, which it wasn't. And yes, it's none of her damn business, but from her perspective, she can't trust her anymore. She's who she thought was a close friend, a bond that she had. She sees it as now as a lie.
I believed you. My father paid the price. And now I realize you lied to me. I've got to. Oh yeah, sure. No. I get that.
But anyway, let's talk about Larys. Is that how you say his name? Larys.
Larys Strong.
Larys Strong.
Clubfoot Strong.
So when the scene when Allison was like looking at the dream, we hear a voice off screen. I swear to you, I was like, Littlefinger. That sounded like Littlefinger's voice. And then they started talking, and his name is Varys. Anyway, so he gives me totally vibes of Varys and Littlefinger. It's like, it's like if you had the shipping name that Larys would it's like the combination of the two, and just the way he talked, and I hope the queen or the princess is well. I heard she had a tea. Like the way he floated around it, where he was flat out had spies and informants and was giving her this information because he knew how she would react. It's totally Littlefinger and Varys. It's like, oh, so this is the Littlefinger Varys character of this show. Okay. I don't know what his motivations are. Even maybe I haven't read Fire and Blood, but I've read other stuff, and I'm still not sure what his motivations are. But it's clear to me that this is the Varys character. And they showed him in one other episode, but I didn't get that Varys vibe from him from that scene, especially where here they go full on 100% Varys. And it did. I can see how it was a bit out of nowhere, and maybe they could led up to this character a bit more. But I'm gonna go with it. I know who he is now, so I'll see where they go with this forward. Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, well, to me, much more Varys than Littlefinger. Just for what you were saying, like this. Oh well, I hope that she's well, because I heard she got a. That's exactly like something Varys would do. to inform somebody something without just coming out and saying it. But yeah, I don't know. I think what I'm gathering his motivation is that he either knows that a war is coming and is trying to do the best to have her prepared for it, or I think maybe he just believes that it should be the male who is the heir, and he wants to give some power to Alicent to make sure that her son becomes king. But it's hard to say. I guess I could just sort of read him as Team Aegon, that he just, for whatever, maybe he's just against women being on the throne, and he wants to kind of empower the boy's mother to make sure that he ends up being the heir. But that's my guess. Like it's hard to really suss out what his motivation is. Maybe as we see this character more, we might get a little bit more of what his motivation might be. But yeah, they did show him before, but they really did kind of go from 0 to 60, because before he just kind of comes, oh look, it's Lairs Clubfoot Strong hanging out with the women, like having some tea. And then all of a sudden he's Varys. Like the next time we see him, they really did go from 0 to 60, and I can see how that might throw off people who don't know who this character is. What is this creepy guy doing in Lake Arden? Where did he come from? I kind of know what he is in the book and what he does, so it's just like I have a different perspective, but I can definitely see where that's another area where maybe they didn't give the people who haven't read the book, they didn't give them enough there with that character. Just like, oh, here he is having tea with the women, and now here he's Varys, and just very, very quickly. But we'll have to see where they're taking this character as far as like what his motivations might be.
Yeah, to me that was kind of the thing, is because look, if the introduction is there's a new player in town, okay, we definitely got that. But you're right, it is the 0 to 60. The fact it's like we don't know anything about his motivation. The fact it took me a moment to sort of remember, he's like, oh, okay, I see why he's there, because he's that guy's son. They said who he was, but of course, the first time they mentioned stuff, I don't think of anything. I just, you're paying attention to what else is coming up. So it took me sort of like a half second to go in. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't any like subtle build up. There wasn't a slow thing. It wasn't like we steer into this conversation. It's immediately mustache twirly and jumping into there. So it was, yeah, I think the 0 to 60 bit was kind of a shock. And I think, again, that's one of the critiques that I have, which is, and I think through a lot of this, is I see what you're doing. I don't get why you're doing it. And the fact that we're about to hit a giant time jump is really, in a way, separating current motivations and future motivations. It's just sort of a weird thing. It's like, we got to get this stuff done, and you'll figure out why later on. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a whiplash of new character, and now we're just gonna push this narrative to get it going and create some problems. What's his motivation? Maybe he just likes chaos. He's the Joker. He just wants to see everything burn.
No, it's chaos is a ladder.
Yeah. You're right. It is a Game of Thrones, so he's got to be going somewhere. But yeah, it's like, why are you just, is this the job of the Hand or someone related to the Hand, is to go and fuck with everything? It's not to protect the realm, it's to fuck with the realm, is the Hand's job.
Well, yeah, I kind of see. I think Alyssa's right that he's probably just. I mean, going off the Varys thing, Varys wants to do what's best for the realm, and I think he thinks it's best for the realm for a male heir to ascend to the throne, so war doesn't break out.
Sure.
Or maybe he wants a war. I don't know.
I don't know, man. Like I said, I don't know. He's new. We'll figure it out, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the Kristen Cole of it all. So this is another scene that I really, really liked with Kristen Cole and Rhaenyra on the boat. I think this really was a great way of showing these two different perspectives of these two different characters. They're in love with each other, they have feelings for each other, yet they have totally different like perspectives on how that love is going to work. And it pretty much, it's a tragic love story, actually. I think that's really powerful, because he wants, because in his mind he's looking at it as kind of the royalty knight thing, because he always dreamed of being a knight, and now he feels like he soiled himself by breaking his oath. And so he kind of feels like his plan to run away is in part to be with a woman that he has feelings for, but also as a way to be like, well, it's not such a horrible cursed thing if we actually get married and live our lives together. So that's all good. But Rhaenyra is not looking at it that way at all. It's more is looking at it from Daemon's perspective, and that Daemon influence coming in is that no, she's a royal. She needs to be the queen. She needs to do her duty, but she can go and fuck whoever she wants and just lust. And lusting and fucking is different than actual marriage or duty and loyalty and all that. And to me, the line that really hit me right there, and I thought was really powerful, was when Rhaenyra proposed. I was like, no, I'm not going to run away with you. You're just gonna, we can do our thing, and I'll go marry this dude, but it doesn't really matter. We can still have our thing. And he was flat out, so you want me to be your whore? Like that. That was just so fucking powerful, I thought. So I love this scene. Let's start with the dissenting voice. Darrin, your take on this thing.
So Kristen Cole, you were so cool, but you're really just a whiny little bitch. This again was one of those like, what the hell? Where did this come from? Scene where he gets the whole WB smited lover speech with the unrealistic let's run away and be together. I was like, you can't be serious. This is now look, I remember being young and after having sex and all the emotions that get involved with it, and you're and you're very fixated and all those things. It's a long time ago, but I remember it. So I mean, I have a certain sympathy for where he does, and in fact where he eventually goes through the end of the episode. I was just really surprised that he was holding and grabbing onto this viewpoint so much. It seemed very unrealistic for a Kingsguard who had been protecting the princess for 3 years now or something like that, that this would even be a realm of possibility. I don't know. I'd also kind of lose the surprise, passionate aspect of it, considering it had to have taken like 30, 35, 40 minutes to get him undressed that, the other night when his full armor and everything, that's not like a long passion thing. You stop, you have tea, you got to get a couple of sips of water before you get down to the next layer. Probably not smelling all that great. I mean, I get she was been drinking. She was in the city. She had the weird Daemon connection. I get where she had gone. His overly emotional response was just very surprising to me in all this. And the fact that he could realistically be like, let's run away together to the far side of the world, and to be surprised by her response was surprising to me. Now, I completely agree with you, that line where he's like, so I'm to be the consort, I'm your whore type kind of thing. I get that. But her response also of kind of like, what? No, you silly little nightman. I will do what I else, and we'll fuck off in the distance. Was a little callous and stuff as well. So, I mean, I am sympathetic in his response. This just to me was a very WB hyper emotional response that unfortunately plays a very large part going forward through the rest of the episode, and only the first of his ridiculous decisions.
Well, I mean, I actually think, Mark, you hit it on the head when you said that he was upset about breaking his oath, and this was kind of a way that could maybe make it okay for him, was that if they get married, then that makes his breaking of his oath just feel a little less just weighted on him. And I think the WB stuff you're describing, I totally buy it. It's real to me because it's not really about her. It's about breaking his vows. And this has been his dream to be in his night. And he got there and then he broke his vows and he is beating himself up. So it's less about really wanting to be with her and more about just beating himself up for breaking his vows and trying to find a way to reconcile that. And I can see from his point of view why he would think she would go with him. In fact, he even says that, well, you've always been talking about how you didn't really want to have this obligation, how it was such a burden for you. So he was probably thinking, yeah, all I ever hear her talk about is how she doesn't want this. So obviously she doesn't want this, so she'll just come with me to escape it. So I'm 100% on team Kristen Cole there. Then why you would believe that? Like, of course you would, because that's in his head. That's what he has heard her talk about over and over again. How she doesn't want this life and how she wants to just do whatever she wants. So that was the logic and why she would probably go along with it. And his reasoning for doing it is, as Mark said too. If they get married, it will maybe they'll make his breaking the oath a little less stingy for him.
Sure. No, I get that. Again, I just laugh because I'm like, yeah, but you had plenty of time to think of it in the 35, 45 minutes it took you to take off that armor about what it was you were doing. This wasn't suddenly caught up in the moment type of thing. Again, facetiously I say that, but not really.
But I think, but it does make it clear. I think it does make it clear that it wasn't just a heat of a moment thing, that he had been harboring feelings for her for a while. And that's why I totally buy that he'd be willing to throw everything away and run off with her. And as Alyssa just said, I buy that he thinks that she would do that. And plus, I think he's also kind of more thinking about himself in this moment. Sure. And, not necessarily what's best for her, but yeah, I think that he is thinking, oh, she only complains about this life, so she doesn't really want it anyway. So he thought it would be a perfect solution, not realizing how power hungry she actually is and how badly she does want to be queen. So then I totally get her reaction. So I personally bought the whole thing. I thought it was powerful stuff.
Oh, and okay. I wanted to address too the thing about her line about, or his line about, what am I, your whore? Yeah, that's exactly what he is to her. Even her response.
Did you think you weren't?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that had they continued onward, I mean, she would eventually throw him away at yesterday's garbage and move on to the next, hot knight or whoever she's interested in. I don't think, I think that there is a genuine infatuation with him that she's had, at least since the first episode when she saw him at the tournament.
I like them together for sure. Yeah. No, the chemistry is definitely there, and there's no disagreement with that. And you're right, I totally get with his motivation, and I can go with this scene much more than I can with the following one I'm sure we're about to get to.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay. So let's get to the next scene with Allison confronting Kristen Cole. Now, there is a little nugget of issue I take with this scene, because it is kind of a sitcom or sometimes drama TV, just a TV show trope, where someone has to use the exact language and specifically worded in the perfect way to not specifically say someone's name, because it's very clear in the scene when Allison's talking to Kristen Cole about Rhaenyra's foul behavior, whatever she refers to it as, that she's thinking of Daemon. She's thinking that Rhaenyra had sex with Daemon, but she never says Daemon's name. And so the whole time Kristen Cole is thinking, oh my God, she knows. and then just confesses. She's like, oh, okay. and goes along with that. She did have to word it perfectly, but on the other hand, that doesn't. So it did bother me, but not too much. It didn't ruin the scene for me, because
we all know what the cinema sins on this particular episode is going to look like.
So, but because I would think when she was talking that it does show how weighted with guilt Kristen Cole is, and just how he's like he automatically is. Also, it's like the good thing that I think the shows and stories do sometimes that show when people are really so like worried about something, they're only thinking of themselves, and so they kind of interpret other things as, "Oh my God, they figured me out," when it's not really. And granted, it was a wee bit contrived in this scene, but I do buy his reaction, and I thought it was really powerful. And he was like, I all I ask is give me a quick death. Like, don't give me slow torture. Like, put me to, like, that's how like weighted he is with it. He's convinced that he's just confessing to something that's going to get him killed. And she's like mercifully is like, oh, you may go. And I think that's more of a political move because she knows that she has this nugget now that she can use in the future. So why would she just have him killed when he could be something at peace that she could save for later on? So I thought it was contrived, but ultimately intriguing. Alyssa, let's start with you this time.
Well, they didn't go quite full sitcom, which I was a little bit worried, where it just drags on the whole episode. There's this comic misunderstanding at the end. You're like, oh, you thought I mean, at least it comes out like right away. What with the misunderstanding is, at least on her part, she knows now. She's like, oh, okay. I see. But I was also looking at from her perspective, is this is when the scales are tipped. This is when she realizes that she cannot trust Rhaenyra. Even if I do still think it's none of her fucking business what Rhaenyra does with her Maidenhead. But she did confront her about it. She thought of her as a close friend, and she was deceived. And this is that moment for her. I didn't read her as being politically savvy enough to think about having Kristen Cole. I could be wrong. I didn't think that. I mean, I think maybe she's on her way to figuring out the Game of Thrones and becoming a little more politically savvy. I have never read her as a character who would be politically savvy enough to think about that. How she has, control over Kristen in that way. I think she just didn't know how to respond. She was like, because she was completely taken aback. This is not at all what she was expecting. So, and Kristen is not the one who she's angry at. So she's like, yeah, go ahead, go, because she doesn't know what else to do. But that's more how I read it.
I completely agree. I think the dismissal afterwards was like, you're not my enemy. And she's not one to just kill people or be politically like, should I kill him, not kill him? Which I think is what threw him off even more, was like, which may lead to a lot of his other mental issues later on in the episode. Sadly, though, this is one of those where, again, I saw a million miles away. The minute that she was called in, I'm like, oh, they're not going to have one of those confusing. And then when she starts talking, I'm like, oh, the non-specific pronouns are now going to mean the misinterpretation. And he rolled over like a freak. Oh, like, I don't know, something that rolls over quickly, like a barrel in the water or something like that. Dominic Licorice in the chat mentions the dude doesn't seem believable as a knight. Certainly not a knight that's seen combat. Because, yeah, does he have the big weight of all this and his concern and love and all these things? For sure. I will go with that. But that he buckled so quickly, so, like, again, I think that's the other thing. Everyone's actions in this episode seem so obvious. It's like they're all begging to be caught with whatever machinations they're trying to do. And for him coming in, it's like he wanted to confess. He wanted to get this off his chest. He felt bad. I kind of get that. But it's like, for Protector that just had this, now he's reactive, and now he just kind of caves before he's even barely questioned about, look, I like Sir Kristen Cole. Now I think he's a whiny little bitch. That's my only thing. My opinion of the character has completely changed. I liked him, and now throughout this whole episode, everything he does makes him more unlikable and less worthy of being liked, in my opinion. So it was, I guess it was just frustrating of like, just again, how easily he rolled over. Just a pushover. Like,
Well, to give my counter view, um, I find him believable as a knight. Like I think he's someone who takes honor and duty seriously, and so that's why it was like eating him up inside, and so he considers himself an honorable man. He's not going to try to hide from his what he did wrong. He's going to face it and face the consequences because he thinks he's an honorable man. So that's exactly how I took it. So I completely buy that he would roll over that quickly.
he loves his honor more than he loves Rhaenyra. That's his weakness right there, man.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you, and it just ties back into the other scene too, where his motivation for wanting to run off as Rhaenyra is to try to save a little bit of that honor, a little bit of that guilt that's overwhelming him. He is an honorable man. If this was, you remember, Jaime Lannister was also in the Kingsguard. He didn't give a shit about breaking his vows. He does. Yeah. He's not an honorable. Criston Cole up to this point is has been a very honorable man, and it's killing him that he broke his vow. So yeah, he's gonna whenever you really feel really guilty about something or feel really bad about something that you did, you're gonna sing like a canary. And yeah, totally believe it. Yeah, and I'm with you, Mark.
Yeah, quick question here, actually, because I might be a little confused, and I might be confusing it with the Night Watch's commitment of. To me, I didn't think that the Kingsguard promised to be chaste. It was I will have no wife and I will father no children. But then I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds a lot like the Night's Watch.
Yeah, that's the Night's Watch one.
Pledge. So
yeah,
with the Kingsguard, are they supposed to be chaste, or are they just not supposed to be married? I know they can't marry because that was what happened with Jaime. But I didn't know if they were supposed to be chaste, which is the complaint that he has. Now, the fact that he slept with the princess, that's also a big thing. I'm going to admit that. But he makes a statement like he was supposed to be chaste. And I again, this is why I'm asking an actual question.
Yeah, the Kingsguard have to be chaste. That's part of their vows.
Okay, so Jaime Lannister is definitely off on all those ends.
He just didn't give a shit. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't give a fuck for a split second that he did any of that. I just wanted to say real quick, Dominic in the chat, I have to resource the source material, but he seems like a guy who's never been in real combat, but he's supposed to protect the heir to the throne. But I don't know maybe he comes across as a guy who's never been in real combat, but that's the whole reason that was the reasoning Rhaenyra got for picking him for the Kingsguard, is because he was the only one who had been in combat. And we saw him kick Daemon's ass in the melee. So, as much of a whiny bitch as you may think he is now, he has been seen on screen to have combat skills, and that's been established in the show that he has combat skills. So absolutely has combat skills.
Oh no, I totally believe that. Like I said, just to me, his behavior doesn't match somebody who's had combat skills. But again, personal interpretation. I will definitely go with that.
Well, speaking of the source material, this is another thing I want to talk about, because for me, this is another example of the video I watched saying, well, this is a change from the book. And I don't really see it that way, because granted, in the book, they said that Rhaenyra made advances towards Criston Cole and he rejected her. But that was as told by Mushroom, a completely unreliable source, something they made clear that you can't believe like 50% of what this guy says. And I've heard, like, I've watched other videos and heard other stuff that people in the realm, like other people other than Mushroom, speculated that they did in fact have an affair. So I think this show could take liberty to go either way, and neither one would be necessarily a change from the book, because it's kind of it's all open to interpretation. Now, there is something later on that is a direct change to the book, which I'll talk about when we get to it later. But this, I don't really see. And actually, I think this is a much more interesting direction. Like, I love that they went in this direction, that they didn't go by Mushroom's telling and that he just rejected her. To me, this is way more interesting. And I buy that he's sort of pushed towards Alicent more, because reading just the source material, it seemed like his swift, of course I hadn't read Fire and Blood, it's just World of Ice and Fire, but it seems like his change to supporting Alicent was rather swift. But this makes it totally believable, totally viable, and I love it. I think it really works.
Okay, see, that makes total sense. By the end of the episode, again, not to jump ahead too much, I was kind of thinking like, oh, I see where he's going to be now. He's going to be the queen's whore and not the princess's whore. Sorry. So am I jumping ahead? I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
But yeah, I agree with you. That's how I interpreted the source material too. Is like, wait, what? He's working for Alicent now? What? Wait, what? Like, it doesn't. It just the show does a lot better job of connecting the dots there and making it make more sense what would lead him to end up being with Alicent, or at least working for Alicent, is what appears is going to happen by the end of this episode. And I get to look at it again. I just actually reread that section of Fire and Blood, and Septon Eustace, I think Septon Eustace is one of the sources, and Mushroom is another source. And they said the opposing things, and one of them said that they slept together, and one of them said that I thought it was Mushroom who said they slept together, but maybe it was the other way around.
Oh, no, I just read World of Ice and Fire, and it said Mushroom was the one that said that Cole pushed her away.
Okay. Well, then, yeah. And then they give this other point of view. There's a Septon that they cite a lot as being one of the sources for the book. And I think then it must have been him who's the one who said that they did sleep together. And I think it's the Maester who's writing the book who decides what happens. Like, he's keeping the history. He's like, well, I believe Mushroom in this case. So this is the official history that I'm saying. But to your point, Mark, it doesn't really go against the book, because both points of view were presented, and the Maester who is writing this history, who is presenting it, who's basically the narrator, I would say an unreliable narrator, has chosen one side. So that doesn't mean that that's what George R. R. Martin wants us to think happened.
Yes.
So I do agree with your point that this does not actually contradict the book, because the both points of view were presented in the book.
Yeah, at least I'm pretty sure it was Mushroom, because I did just read that section as well. But yeah, so anyway, let's see, where are we at? So yeah, the big feast, the welcome feast. We see everyone, all the Lannisters and everyone join up, and the whole royal party sitting there drinking, being all merry, and they'll look at the cute couple. And then Viserys is giving his sort of clumsy speeches, and then Alicent comes in, makes a big show of things, which is very unlike her, and wearing all green, which is very significant. In fact, one of the characters kind of even spells it out, which I think is necessary, because people unfamiliar with the source material wouldn't know this. That the green is what they use in Hightower to symbolize war or conflict or something.
Call to arms,
yeah, call to arms. So she's basically declaring war on Rhaenyra, I believe, by wearing this green dress and just interrupting this whole thing. And the way she goes up to Rhaenyra is like, I'm very happy for you, stepdaughter, was so fake. And it really shows exactly just how she is totally anti-Rhaenyra now. And I thought the whole thing was brilliant, personally. Darrin, your thoughts on this?
I will just say it's very effective for that. It is what it says. I do appreciate that they gave the obvious, you know what the color is when they do this, because otherwise I would not have known. I mean, it was definitely, I think that was even when I came in, I was like, yep, and everybody's slapping their dick down in the room. And that was her. She just walked up and went, Slamo! And walked in and strutted through. interrupting the king. Yeah, that's kind of a thing. But yeah, I agree. It made its statement as it intended to. Is this is her coming in, grabbing her power, making her statement, making her particular choice, and the fact that she is going to be at odds with Rhaenyra going forward. You know, clumsy or not clumsy is up to interpretation, but it was very effective, I think, for what it did.
I just want to address stress-free K in the chat saying I think that it's declaring war against the king, not Rhaenyra, which is interesting. That could be the case. Anyway, Alyssa.
I don't know. Well, she's declaring war against the idea of Rhaenyra getting being the heir as of over her son. So whether that's, so that's kind of both of them, to be honest with you, because that's what she's. It's not as much declaring war. They did throw in that little line there for the people who haven't read the books to kind of clarify things, but I didn't interpret it as like a call to arms or a call to war, as more as a protest, as more as a statement, as more of a big fuck you, like. Yeah, green comes into play in the book, and so when I saw it, I was just like, "Ooh, she's wearing green! Oh no, she's wearing green! Oh, she's cool." But so it's good that they had that line in there for those who didn't know that. But I don't know. I wasn't thinking of it as a call to arms as much as like a big fuck you and like more of a protest. But whatever it was badass. This is where I really think Alicent has come into her own. It's unfortunate that this is the last episode that this particular actress gets to portray her, but I'm glad that she got this scene in before the actress departs the show, because I think that this is what really puts Alicent on the map now, and I love it. I thought Alicent up to this point has been pretty underutilized, not really developed that much. So I loved it. I think this is probably one of my favorite scenes of the whole season, to be perfectly honest with you.
Nah, yeah, I thought it was really good too. All right, so let's talk about Daemon's entrance and how he kind of they just get another chair for him. I'm surprised that they just let him sit up there. I suppose they just didn't want to cause any disturbance. Or like
Viserys definitely gives him the stink eye. He was like,
"Oh yeah,
seriously, dude."
And then the whole thing with the Royce guy correctly accusing him of murdering Lady Rhea, and he's just kind of like quickly denies. It's like, oh, by the way, I'm set to inherit all this land. I think I'm gonna go up to the Vale. I was like, really makes him quite despicable. But what I found even more interesting is this little dance with Rhaenyra, where I don't know. I don't really know what to make of this interaction where she's obviously being facetious, where she's like, why don't you just cut your way through all of my father's men and steal me away and marry me for yourself? And he does like kind of whole embrace her, and you can see Viserys sees that and gets fucking pissed. It's like what the fuck, and especially in front of everyone like that, because he doesn't want the rumors to start. Yeah, Alyssa, let's start with you with the whole Daemon of
Yeah. Well, yeah. I kind of just he's just so delightfully evil, just so delightfully despicable. Where it's just like, oh yes, so by the way, I've been meaning to talk to you anyway. I could what about my inheritance that I get now that my wife is dead? Like just the pure balls, the cojones on this guy being accused of something that he knows perfectly well that he did, and then going, oh by the way, so where's my inheritance? And there were a lot of looks exchanged between Viserys and Lionel Strong, where they're like, oh yeah, he totally fucking did it. Like, absolutely, he fucking killed her. I actually thought that when Corlys first told them back at Driftmark, that they looked at each other like, Oh, really? So she just died, huh? like they just know. Like
Died.
it's so obvious. Yeah, no, I really enjoy Damon as a character. He's just so delightfully dickish. Now, as far as his exchanges with Rhaenyra, I think that was very much Rhaenyra calling him out on his shit and just throwing it right out in his face. Like, yeah, oh, so this is me saying to you, I know what you're up to, bitch. Like, I know what you're doing. That's what that was. Um, yeah, and as far as like what his motivations are, I mean, I don't know. I just think he really has a thing for his niece. That's kind of how I've been reading it. But um, and I mean, also the power that would come with that that coupling. But I think he wants her to. I think he likes a strong woman, and I don't know. Of his choosing, because I guess his wife was also really a strong woman, as far as I could tell too. But he didn't choose her, so he wants to be able to pick. But yeah, I don't know. That's how I
Well,
read it.
another thing worth mentioning that I forgot to mention is we see him sort of flirting with Lenore's sister. Um,
Yeah, what is her
the
name again? It's something similar to his. He's
uh,
Lenore. He's Lenore, and she's. I think she's Lenora, and he's
Lenora.
Lenore.
Okay,
I think
Lenore
he's
and
Lenore, and she's Lenora, or something. They have similar names, but something like that. Yeah, he was flirting with her as well. Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah, but that makes sense for Damon. I mean, again, Damon is the demon ghost of Westeros. He's just there to fuck things up at this stage. He's just there to poke things because, yeah, the whole arrival in is like, where did you come from? Why do you think you're here? Why is the king giving this? Does he not know anything about where anybody is? The king seems very misinformed, is what I'm talking about. His people are not very good people. Um, but yeah, his whole arrival and dance bit here was just ridiculous. I just kept seeing that scene. There's a meme from Morbius of the actor dancing and doing this whole ridiculous thing, and that's almost what I'm seeing in my head as I watch this. Is he's just walking in, do 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 do. Um, and the fact that the guy comes up and basically accuses him, and he's like, "No, I didn't, but I get her stuff, right?" And just totally throws the guy off. It's like, again, he's just poking and messing with things. What is his motivation? Does he want his niece? Maybe. Does he just like causing chaos? Maybe. I don't even know if Damon knows what his motivation is outside of just kind of like messing with things, because that seems most of what he's doing. He isn't moving with somebody with an obvious game plan or end game or anything like that. Um, and when I mentioned before about everybody just begging to be caught, that whole dance sequence is right there. It's like, what are you just going to go try and make out with Rhaenyra in front of the king in the middle of her wedding time? Again, what are you doing here? How are you expecting not to be killed since the last
well,
time the king, like, literally kicked the shit out of you?
the thing about that is that would probably hurt her more than it would him.
Sure, again, this is why I'm like, are you just an agent of chaos at this point, just messing with things as opposed to somebody with an actual, like, goal or end game or bid? And to me, again, that's the frustration point. While I do like Matt Smith and I like Damon generally as a character, I think it's because he's the only one that seems to be trying to do something, even if I don't know what it is, and everyone else is just reacting off of what everybody else is doing in one form or another. So, yeah, again, what I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what Damon's doing. I'll just watch him dance. I do actually like him with the sister. I was like, you saw them kind of flirting back and forth. I was like, okay, see, I could see this is going somewhere for him. This has a political advantage for him as well, which I could get.
Cool. All right. So let's move on to the big hubbub, the big rumble. It's of course gotta. I think someone in the chat earlier said that something about Game of Thrones wedding without at least one death is a dull affair. Yes, of course. And yeah, so actually, this is my biggest complaint about this episode. When I first saw the scene, it confused the hell out of me. Like I had no idea. I think I didn't like the way it was shot and edited. I think it was too unclear to me of what the hell was going on. I had to actually go back and watch this scene like several times because at first it looked like to me those guards who are in like red armor. I don't even know who the fuck they are. It looked like they were coming in and like fighting people and pushing everyone back, and then everyone was just beating each other up for no reason. But when I went back and watched the scene, I think they were trying to withhold the fact that Kristen Cole was beating the fuck out of Joffrey, not Joffrey, not that one, but and everyone was sort of giving like pushing away from them and the area is clear, and that's what's causing, since there's so many people there, it's causing everyone to push back, and that the guards came in response to that to try to calm things down, and then it wasn't just random people hitting each other. We got Lenore trying to, of course, protect his lover, and so he goes after Kristen Cole, but Kristen Cole beats him back. But then there is some random fighting in here. Like I don't know, is it the other Kingsguard like also sticking up for? I didn't really get it. And then what's his face, Lionel Strong, like sort of nods to his son, and his son goes in and like beats the shit out of people and grabs Rhaenyra and takes her away. Why does he need to beat the shit out of people? I don't know. I guess it's the quickest way to get to her. I don't know. So the whole way this was shot was very confusing. So to me, that was kind of the biggest complaint I had about this episode. But the scene itself, what they're getting across, I thought was, again, made perfect sense for Kristen Cole's character, because he is stewing like this whole time, having to watch Rhaenyra go up and marry another guy. He is not a happy guy. He is really upset. And Joffrey's actually portraying him as someone who's really smart, because he was able to pick up on the fact that they're constantly glancing at each other. He's like, oh, so he's the one. But he was not smart enough to read him, I guess, to read the room, as they say, and realize that he was actually not in a good mood, not a happy chap. And for him to say, he was like, but he was genuine. He's like, look, it's all good. Like, we're going to reach out. We're going to protect each other. But of course, this set Kristen Cole off, because he's just, for him, he's not okay with being, as he said earlier, her whore. And the fact that he's sort of like promoting that situation, it just sets him off, because he's already like so much turmoil inside, and that he just goes fucking nuts and literally beats him to death. But then I have questions, because as I said, when Lenore was trying to fight off Kristen Cole punched him. Isn't he like gonna get the death sentence for punching like the future King Regent? But I suppose maybe Alicent is going to protect him. I don't know. Maybe they'll address that in another episode. But the whole thing happened way too fast for me. So, but anyway, Darrin, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. To me, again, I've got a lot of directorial issues with the way the episode came out, and this is definitely one of those in shooting, because it was intended to be confusing. There was no reason for people to react. Why was the crowd running in to jump in like that? Wouldn't they spread? Why was there inner fighting? It was like there was suddenly a giant hubbub to be confusing, but why that happened or is, and again, because we didn't really see the actual aspect and why everybody was reacting the way they did, why, yeah, a guy beats up another one, is that common enough for everybody to come in and cloister around? I don't know what the general reaction, but it seemed to be a group melee, not a singular reaction for a big crowd like that, which is why I was, again, kind of confused. And again, I think it was done intentionally so you could be like the king, what's going on? but I just think that was poorly shot, personally. As for the whole Christian Cole of it all in the midst of this, was he obvious at all? He was the only knight there without the helmet, so he could be obvious in his glaring across the room at the whole time. Like I said, everyone's begging to be caught. Viserys would have been in the corner looking around and would have figured everybody's motivation by this dinner, because everyone was very obvious in how they were looking back and forth. His seething, of course. Joffrey figured out, who the lover is, because he's obviously there doing the lover reactions. The fact that he goes up and confronts him, even though it's the, hey, you be cool and we're cool all together. Man, you just met this guy. That's a big, bold statement to be making right in the middle when you can tell that he is emotionally reactive at the moment. I think Joffrey was really stupid to do all of that, personally. I think everything was pushed too hard. I mean, and again, that was the problem. To me, nobody was subtle. Everybody was obvious. So people getting and seeing things wasn't a surprise in any standpoint. Yeah, and so at some point something happened and he snapped. Okay. I mean, I guess I can go with it. He's a little emotionally reactive right now. I mean, again, not a controlled combat driven knight. Maybe he's got a little PTSD. Maybe that's part of his problem. I don't know. But we don't really, that's not really for us to know. And again, we're going to do a time jump, so we're not really going to dwell with any of these issues. And obviously this leads to him coming over to Alicent's side afterwards, where we get that little kind of final scene where he's about to end it all because he's done a bad thing. And she kind of pulls him away. So, I mean, I get where they're going and moving with that. But everything else, again, it was just both too obvious or intentionally obscured. And none of that really in a good way. Not that we, the audience, pick it up, but nobody else does. It seemed to me obvious that everybody should be seeing this. And I guess that's why I was like, man, all these people suck. Nobody's subtle, or I don't even get any positive motivation with any of this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, I just wanted to address something in the chat where Stress Free K said Joffrey picked the wrong day to needle Kristen. And for some reason, when I read that, I thought of Joffrey picked the wrong day to quit sniffing glue.
That's exactly what I thought.
That was also true. Also true.
I thought of that exactly too from Airplane. Yeah, I wanted to say my piece about this scene as well. So this is the change you were referring to earlier, Mark, I assume, from the book. This is an actual change because Kristen does kill, he does go nuts and beat the shit out of Joffrey, but it's in the context of a melee. But since they already did the melee scene in episode 1, they decided, well, we're not going to be repetitive and do that again. So they decided to repurpose it. And I like this as a motivation better. I like the idea of this better than just having a melee and he just kind of loses his shit in the melee. And Joffrey in that circumstance just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I kind of like this motivation better. To me, it ties together better. It gives better motivation for the character. So I like the choice to make this change. However, I do kind of agree with what you guys are saying is a poor directorial choice too. It was intentionally obscured where we couldn't see what was happening at first. I mean, that was very intentional. And I don't know why. Like, why do we not get to see what's happening at first? Like, why? I don't know what kind of emotions that's supposed to create in us. That is supposed to help us to better process the scene. I'm not really. I didn't love that particular choice. I think it should have been more clear. Now, as far as why Kristen is not wearing his helmet and he's being obvious, because he's just reacting emotionally. He's not thinking about it. And he reacts. Yeah, he reacts emotionally at the end where he wants to go and kill himself now. It's like, well, now I've really fucked it up at this point. So my life is over. But I'm assuming, yes, that Alicent is going to protect him. And since there is going to be a time jump, we may get a line like, "Oh, I remember that time you protected me from the. It wasn't that good." Huh? Like, well, we might get something. But I think even if we didn't, like, I think you could safely assume that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Is that she's going to stick up for him and keep anything from happening to him, and maybe that'll be what she uses. It's like, well, you couldn't really tell. It was just this crowd of people, and people were just beating each other. Who's to say who was really responsible?
The wedding, things happen.
Yeah. I mean, she could end up using something like that. But that would be my I like the choice to have this take place in this context rather than at a melee. But I do agree that I don't necessarily agree with the choice to obscure it in that way.
I'm kind of got mixed feelings about the whole changing it from the tournament to the wedding, because I agree that the character motivations, maybe like the fact that he's set off by this and it's just everything building like that works for me, but I know, like we're saying, Allison will probably protect him, and I'm sure she will. But I just buy it like more that he gets away with it if it was during a melee, because it's a melee, shit happens. But in the middle of a gathering with all these roller skaters where he like beats someone to death, it seems like there should be consequences for that. Whereas opposed to melee, he kind of get away with it.
Well, again, everybody was beating up everybody. All you saw, King Viserys, was just a wave of people. You saw from his point of view, like, who knows to say.
Wow. We know Laenor saw very clearly.
Yeah.
And I do think that Laenor would definitely call for his head.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah. So
would he though? Because then, I mean, everybody knows he's gay, but you're going to just openly, "Oh, that's my lover." Like, how are you going to?
He doesn't have to say it's his lover. It was someone in his company. He could just go with that. This was my squire, whatever the fuck he was. Like, that's not all good for him. And plus, he cried over his dead body, so it was clear to everyone there he felt something for him. But
he can't like publicly admit that.
He doesn't have to admit it's his lover. It's my whole point, though.
It's a straight up murder in front of everyone. I mean, that's usually where they have the death penalty, is with the murder. Yeah. So,
no, I think he'd have to be careful, honestly. I think he would have to be careful about how he would call for his head, and maybe he does. But Alicent is more powerful than he is. So maybe.
I mean, it could be. I mean, I'll see how this is handled. I do hope they explain it and don't just gloss over it, because
there's a 10-year time jump, so don't get your hopes up too much.
Yeah, well, that's what worries me, the 10-year time jump, because I think to me this is a plot hole that needs to be explained. How he could get away with just killing someone in front of all the royals. But
now I know it's probably where we're going next, I'm guessing, but I know that because of this is what ends up pushing the whole wedding to, instead of a week after tournaments, we're just going to elope, we're going to do it, we're going to grab the Grand Maester and get this done and out of the way right now.
All right, so that's the next point I wanted to get to.
Yeah, but the thing with that is, to me, this is the one thing where I realize it couldn't have happened, because we have to have a time jump and there has to be things, and we see later on that the king is still alive, but he's been falling apart this entire episode. And after the wedding, I mean, he drops down, and the only thing that I was thinking of is, would be actually a really interesting shift is if he died before the wedding. Because that would put everybody into an interesting point. Is Rhaenyra going to continue to be married? Is she going to marry him? Is she going to go with someone else? Is the heir going to fall to him? Now everybody could maneuver and set their designs. Just watching this episode, I was like, oh, if he died before the wedding, that would make things really interesting. Now, knowing that they were going to a jump and that couldn't happen because there would be no reason to do a time jump to have all the drama that would all be happening right now. I knew it wasn't going to, but that was the one thing watching all of this. I was like, that that would make things interesting. That would kick things off, because unfortunately how it does end, it's like, okay, and now on to the next chapter. Nothing's changed. Or little has.
So all right, I wanted to address the chat. Alex 409 says the queen will push the king for a pardon for Sir Cole, which I can see, but I want a line about it. Like I want to.
They may throw a line in. There might just be a line that says, "Oh yeah, remember that time where?" Yeah, there might be something.
I'd be happy with that, but I think they need to address it in some way.
They may, yeah, they may do that. They might.
And Lily Mac says leprosy, finger here and earlobe there. Yes, it had been confirmed by the actor in an interview that what Viserys has is leprosy.
Oh, see, I was thinking it was grayscale, because when they had that one shot of his arm, it was like all up his arm.
A lot of people were thinking grayscale.
But that was also like, well, but even leprosy, I mean, that's all pretty contagious. Wouldn't they expect like the queen now would, and people around? I mean, I don't know where they're going to go in 10 years, and maybe that's going to be a contributing factor into things. But I was like, oh, that can't be good for anyone around him.
Yeah, so you did already kind of address this, but I wanted to talk about the shotgun wedding, and to me that was, I mean, that happened like this. As far as the scene goes, it happened too fast. I was like, oh, so they're getting married. Like I didn't know if there was a time jump, but then they went back and showed the blood on the floor and the rat eating the blood. I was like, okay, there's not a time jump. They just got married immediately, which is, I guess, I don't know, like. I don't know why he was like, oh, well, fuck this shit. Let's just get this over with. If you're all going to treat me like that and bash people's head in, so let's just get this over with and not draw this out. I don't know. That kind of seemed, as a storytelling perspective, it seemed a bit sudden. I know in universe, it being sudden was the whole point, but I don't know. But anyway, I don't know how I feel about Viserys falling apart. I think that maybe they overplayed that as well, but especially when we see in the next preview for the next episode that he's alive 10 years later. But not if we already started talking about the previews, so sorry if you don't like that kind of talk. But someone pointed out, if you watch the trailer, he's always sitting down. We never see him standing up.
His butt's falling off. It's a horrible thing that happens.
Yeah, well,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No.
Oh, I thought you had something to say, Alyssa, about the whole wedding or Viserys falling apart.
I was going to make some kind of joke about him being in a wheelchair and relating it to Bran somehow, but I couldn't think of it. But
because he has good stories. Who has better stories than Viserys?
No, I will say I do think that we're going to probably see that he's alive, but at what quality of life? That's what I foresee. I think that I could even picture. We don't see him much in the trailer, but I could picture a scenario where he's just like, even like. He's lost his mind at this point. They're like, yes, sure, your grace, yes, and just appeasing him, like he doesn't even know what's happening anymore. I could see something like that happening. I think that at the very least he'll be very physically deteriorated, and I don't think that he's still going to be alive. But I think the point of what we saw in this episode was to show that he's alive, but maybe he's not going to have the best quality of life. And you project that out by 10 years, then it's going to be, a life, he's not going to have a high quality of life. Let's put it that way.
Now, I know we're going way over for this, but I did want to very briefly touch on how we feel about the 10-year time jump next episode before we see next week's episode, because I got trepidations about it. On the one hand, I was worried about the whole, sort of, was it Ian McKellen? No, who am I thinking of? Ewan McGregor turning into Alec Guinness after 8 years or some shit. And so they're doing a 10-year time jump, then that kind of corrects that. But I feel like it's going to be hard for me to to feel like I'm missing a lot of the story. I don't know. Like, I'm a bit worried about it. I'm hoping that they'll handle it in a way where I don't feel like I'm like missing important beats of the story.
Well, yeah, and there all of a sudden there's going to be all these kids.
Yes.
What I've seen in the previews that yeah, both Rhaenyra and Alicent are going to have had kids from the coming out of their respective marriages, and so there's just going to be boom a whole bunch of new characters. Which, knowing how things are going to go, those are important characters, and they have. It just really would have been difficult to do this without a time jump. And knowing the kind of the full picture as I do, they would have to do a time jump at some point in there. So I have had very few complaints so far this season about how they have adapted the source material and how a lot of the decisions that they've made. It's not been perfect, obviously, but I have enough faith in what I've seen so far in the show that I have faith that they will find a way to handle it well, to where we don't feel like we missed a large chunk of the story, where it feels like, okay, those are 10 years we could have yada yada. I think that, as long as they tie up those loose threads, like what you were talking about before with how Kristen Cole still gets to be around, and those sorts of things, I think that period of history is just a lot of like parents raising their kids from what I recall.
Sure.
Nothing really happens, and so I think that I think there is very much a path for the show to present it as something that we walk away from feeling like, okay, we didn't really need to see that, and we can connect the dots here and we can make it work. So I have faith that it will work, but I also see a path where they could just totally bomb it and it's not coming across very well. But based on what I've seen in the show so far, I have faith that they'll pull it out.
And I also think it's going to be hard for me to all of a sudden accept new actresses playing these characters, but that is a necessity. They can't like dress up a 18-year-old as someone who's in their 30s. That would look a bit ridiculous. So, but it is going to be a hard adjustment, I think.
I think the actress who's the other one who plays Rhaenyra kind of looks very similar. Like they look very similar. I'm more concerned about the Alicent change.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought Alicent change I thought that looked good as well.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'll see next week. But
Disney wouldn't let them use their de-aging technology, so they had to have two different actors.
Yeah.
I don't, I've got to agree with, I guess agree with both of you. I have a certain reservations. I agree, Alyssa. I think they'll probably find a way to have this work and make sense, and that we don't feel that there's a missing. But I do feel kind of reticent, one, because it feels like the king is about to die right now, and 10 years from now, he's still around. So there's a momentum. I guess that's it. There's a momentum with these characters' motivations that now has to be all shuttered, stopped. And then we pick up kind of 10 years, especially since we spent 5 episodes, half of the season, with these younger characters. And now the big stuff is going to happen in a jump. I feel like there's a certain question as to why all of this happened, or why we focused so much if the real story is now going to happen at much further in the future. This is just from watching it. I'm like, emotionally, I feel like a little shutter steppy here, and I'm not sure if that's going to pick up cleanly. On the other hand, I'm pretty sure they figured out a way to do that, to make that work. So I have hope, and for the most part, I've enjoyed the series, and I think that they've done a good job. So I'm hopeful that will just continue, and my concerns are going to be quickly abated. But I'd be lying to say if I wasn't like, how is this going to work entirely? Am I going to care about what's happened going into the next thing, or is there going to be new motivations that now I have to catch up with? That's my question.
Yeah, and I feel kind of similar. Like, I have confidence that they'll be able to pull it off good, but not 100% confident. Not full confidence. Like 75%.
75%. So you get 3/4, 2/3, 3/4. Okay, that's.
All right, so we can go ahead and end this discussion here. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Say hello to Fiona in the chat. Hello. And everyone else in the chat joined us. Stress Free K, Lily, Alex, Dominic, and everyone else who joined us. Thanks so much for joining. And everyone, of course, who's watching in the archives. Thanks so much for checking us out. And also, speaking of checking out, check out where are we at? These people on their channels and what they're up to. We'll start with Alyssa. So where can people find you?
You can find me over at Alyssa Jean Reviews. I'm doing Star Trek Lower Decks weekly. And in just a couple days from now, I will be releasing my personal review of the first half of the season of House of the Dragon, and that will be combined with a video that will give my predictions. It's for the book readers only because I'm going to be basing it specifically off of things that haven't happened yet on the show, so you have to be a book reader to watch that unless you don't care about being spoiled. But I will have it'll be my review and my predictions, so please check that out and come follow me on my channel.
So is it the review and predictions going to be two separate videos?
No, it's one video.
Oh, one video.
When you if you haven't read the book, you check out after the review part of it. I will give you plenty of spoiler warning if you don't want to be spoiled now, this is the time to go. There's no reason to do it in two separate videos. Just going to make one big long video, and for those who haven't read the book yet, then you will just skedaddle after the spoiler-free review part. Spoiler-free, provided you've seen the show. The whole spoiler thing gets a little hairy when you're talking about there's book spoilers and then there's you haven't watched the show at all spoilers. Yeah. So you have to have watched the show, obviously. Yeah.
All right, so Darrin, what are you doing these days? What about Thursday? Are you busy Thursdays at all?
Interesting that you asked there, Mark, because of course we, all of us mostly on there, can catch us on Thursday nights at 6 o'clock Pacific time to catch our She-Hulk reviews. Been enjoying the series for the most part. Very excited about this week's episode. And if there's some time, and there often is, hey, Andor drops, I think tomorrow night, very late. For me, it's midnight. I think that is still Tuesday night.
No, I think it's midnight. Yeah, technically midnight tonight on West Coast time.
Oh, is it?
No, tomorrow night, because it's
tomorrow
Monday.
Night. Yeah, Tuesday. Right. It's Monday. Yeah. Yes, it's Monday. Yes.
Sorry, folks. I don't know what day it is, but I know that Andor is coming out. So we might mention that a little bit in the review. Perhaps after we cover She-Hulk. These things are kind of flexible. We'll do it. So check us out Thursday nights. And we still got, another 3-4 episodes left of She-Hulk in the season. So more fun stuff. And you can catch these lovely people there almost all the time.
Cool. So if you're catching me for the first time, my name is Mark. My channel is Enchantment of Eternity. And I, of course, cover House of Dragon with these lovely people every Monday night. And I'm over on Darrin's channel for She-Hulk every Thursday night. And I also do recorded reviews for Star Trek Lower Decks and Lord of the Rings of Power every week, and other various fun Star Trek videos and whatnot. I got my top 10 worst Star Trek retcon video coming out on Wednesday, so I'm really excited for that one. So anyway, yeah, be sure to check me out. Thank you for everyone for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye. Yeah.